Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Live Free Now show. I'm your host, John Bush, and today we have a wonderful program lined up for you. We're going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about living the good life. And shortly, we'll be joined by Jonathan England of Earthwaking Village, Earthwaking University, to talk about manifesting heaven on earth. We'll tap into what he's doing down in Costa Rica with this incredible community that's entirely in the private realm. And a lot of people are really vibing down there. He's got dozens of community members and seeking more expansion, all sorts of great stuff. We're going to talk philosophy. We're going to talk empowerment, spirituality. So you definitely want to stick around for that. If you're just joining us, again, this is John Bush with the Live Free Now show, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live a free, prosperous, and healthy life. We come at you every Wednesday. We're going to be shifting the time of the show so I can join my good friend Bradley Logan, his membership. He does a lot of work in the private realm. If you've ever found his work before, it's all about opting out of the matrix, creating real freedom, leveraging a private membership association, a non-statutory trust, creating a 508c1a ministry so you can be accepted from the tax code and do God's work on this earth. Anyway, if anybody wants to check out this webinar we did with him, you could head over to livefree.academy/Trinity, livefree.academy/Trinity. But I share that just to say, if you're listening on the podcast, or especially if you're somebody that shows up live on YouTube and X when we broadcast there, we'll probably be bumping the show back to 1 or so. But anyway, I digress. What do we have to talk about today? I wanted to share a bit about money. I know money is a taboo subject for many people. A lot of people get anxious and a little bit worked up when it comes to money. Shout out Joseph Easley, by the way. And it's understandably so. I believe that we are all impacted by the money mindset and the feelings about money that our parents had, that society has, culture has. And you got to understand, too, that it wasn't but just a few generations ago, at least here in the United States, that the people at the time lived through the Great Depression. And can you imagine the trauma that many people experienced, losing work, not being able to eat, just really struggling, the farm going downhill? And that's definitely has a negative impact on people. And then that fear and scarcity and uncertainty gets imparted upon the next generation and so on down the line. And so I just really want to cut to the chase and let people know that if you are struggling financially, which is understandable, things are getting harder and harder with the inflation and all these onerous government regulations and nonsense and the inflation. The number one thing that we can do is get our mind right. Sure, there's tons of tactics and strategies to study. Sales funnels, marketing, producing a product, getting ahead as an employee, finding a job that has room for growth so you're not just stuck earning an X amount of dollars per hour, right? There's only so far you can get with that, but there's tons of tactics and strategies that you can leverage and employ. But the number one thing that you can do is get your mind right. Reevaluate the relationship that you have with money. There's something called limiting beliefs, which we all struggle with. These limiting beliefs, which I'm sure Jonathan would refer to them as a false perception, also known as sin. We can talk more about that when he joins us here shortly. But these limiting beliefs really hold us back. A limiting belief is a false belief that someone holds about themselves that hinders them from living the good life, from fulfilling their goals. And these limiting beliefs, just the same, get imparted upon us by parents, by friends, by peers, colleagues, maybe a school bully. So, for example, a limiting belief, this is something that comes up often with us. We do the Exit and Build Land Summit, right, which is all about exit the cities, buy land, build community in the country. The Smart City Agenda is rolling out surveillance, crime, just all sorts of wacky politics in the big cities. And we're like, hey, you would experience greater freedom if you lived out in the country, in a rural area, or in the forest of Costa Rica. And we explain how people can go about doing that. You can save up for a down payment. That's what Rebecca and I did. Put a down payment on a piece of property, get a mortgage, buy a property outright, go in with other freedom friends in order to mitigate the payment, whatever it may be. Buy a lot in an intentional community, buy an RV, learn some skills, move out to someone's property and pay rent, or just do like a work trade, whatever it may be. And so we're explaining these things, but the first thing that often springs up for so many people is, how could I move out to the country and buy a piece of land? I can barely afford rent. I can't afford to do something like that, right? And so a couple things rise from that. And that's a great line that a lot of people tell themselves. It's not a great line. It's not positive, but it's something that happens more often than not. I can't afford it. So two things. Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. That's a writer downer if I ever heard one. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can afford to buy a piece of land or you can't afford it, you're right. Whether you think you can put on a big successful event and impact people's lives or you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can start the massage business you've always been dreaming about because you're so good with your hands or you can't, you're right. Really, the mindset dictates. We have so much capabilities, and we're just, none of us are living up to our full potential, and we like put a limiter. I remember when I was younger, my buddy had this GMC Yukon, and we'd get all crazy, and he'd drive so fast, but it had a limiter at 90 miles an hour. Maybe it was 100. Anyway, it's called a governor, I should say. The engine doesn't allow you to go beyond that. We oftentimes put a governor on ourselves and our potential through these limiting beliefs. So I think Henry Ford was absolutely correct. So I want to encourage people to really just get mindful about the thoughts that you have, and are they helping you or are they hurting you? Are they helping you push through resistance, or are they creating the resistance? Are they helping or hindering? Another great quote from Robert Kiyosaki, who I introduced myself to him at Freedom Fest recently. He was kind of a jerk. I don't know, like talk smack on people. Anyway, I was like, oh my God, Robert Kiyosaki, your book was so impactful for me. He's like, yeah. And he like scurried away. I was like, this guy. Anyway, regardless of that interaction, he does have a lot of good wisdom to share. And he said, don't say, I can't afford it. This is what I call a flipping of the script. You don't say, I can't afford it, or maybe you find yourself saying, I can't afford it, and then you catch yourself through mindfulness. In the moment, you're like, whoa, I just watched this video John did the other day, and I just said I can't afford it. You flip it. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, you say, how can I afford it? See, because then it's no longer a problem. Now you're seeking a solution, which is a permaculture principle. You see, every problem has a partnering solution. And when you step into solutions focus, when you start to believe in yourself, you really can create a life of your dreams. There's no reason why we shouldn't be living lives of our dreams. We'll talk about Jonathan with that. Like, he created this incredible intentional community and an incredible life for himself and those who are around him. And he didn't know what the heck he was doing at first, but he figured it out because he believed in himself and he wanted that for himself and his family and his community. So for folks that are living in struggle, feeling pain, uncertainty, hardship, it doesn't have to be that way. Now, I know it's easier said than done, and of course we all have different levels of struggle and different levels of trauma, but at the end of the day, even the folks that have experienced major hardship, major pain, living in abject poverty, oftentimes the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. And if you can tune your mind to empowerment, right? So imagine our mind is like a tool, and that tool can help us or hurt us. It can help us or hinder us, right? And imagine there's a knob here. And unfortunately, the default setting of most people's minds is one of negativity, self-doubt, insecurity. And it's no wonder. It's because we live in a trauma-based society, and we're barely even opening up to generations that know how to communicate with one another nonviolently, men that are capable of expressing emotion outwardly without feeling insecure. I mean, you go back again a couple generations, the same generation that lived through the Great Depression, or a generation after, lived through World War II. Like, imagine the traumatic experience a nation went through with that going on. And people weren't in tune with their emotions. It was seen as weakness to express your emotions. So it's no wonder that people have the tuning set to negative, doubt, insecurity, especially if you went through public school. People were so damn mean to each other in public school. I was a victim of mean bullies, and I was a bully myself. Maybe I was a bully because I was a victim of bullies. But the point is, we have the capability of tuning our mind so that we no longer are our own worst enemy. Rather, we become our biggest cheerleader and our number one champion in life. And I tell you what, one of the most powerful things we can do in order to tune that mind, and this is a huge epiphany that I had, a huge realization I had. I realized I was like knee deep in all the tactics and strategies, both tactics and strategies for making more money as an entrepreneur. I've been self-employed since 2009, so that's like 15 years now. But for the biggest chunk of that time, I was in the poorhouse and struggling to make ends meet. Same thing with being a better father or a better significant other. I was like angry and short-tempered and all tense and edgy. But I was studying nonviolent communication. I was studying Buddhism. And it was through Buddhism that I learned about mindfulness. Mindfulness, such a powerful, powerful thing, mindfulness. When you're mindful, you're fully present in the moment. You're conscious of the present moment. You're not thinking in terms of judgment. You're not anxious about what's coming up next week. You're not depressed or frustrated about some mistake you made 2 days ago. You're fully present and aware in the moment. And when you're mindful and conscious in the moment, that enables you to catch those thoughts as they occur. You see, a lot of people in the freedom community, we pride ourselves on like, we're red-pilled and we woke up. Right? You never truly wake up until you're like ascended or reach nirvana, right? But we're like, we're awake. All the normies are programmed, when in all reality, we have just as much programming. And think about that program. It's like a code that gets executed, or television. You're watching a television program. Without mindfulness, we're not capable of seeing that there's a program being played within our minds. And again, that program is programmed by parents, by siblings, by spouses, by bullies in high school. And through mindfulness, we can kind of pull ourselves out of that subconscious thought, out of that mindless, unaware track of thought that we find ourselves caught up in, and we can pull back and be like, whoa, where did that thought even come from? Why do I feel that way? Why did I just say that to myself? And we can learn to reprogram ourselves, or as I like to call it, flip the script. How could I possibly ever afford that? I can't afford that. I've always struggled with finances, right? And now when you're mindful, you're like, whoa, I just said I've always struggled with finances. If you say that kind of stuff, you most definitely are going to manifest that, okay? Through mindfulness, you can catch yourself. Same thing, and when you really tap into it, you can actually prevent those thoughts from rising up altogether, because it becomes a habit. In the beginning, it's a challenge. But then when you're able to do it over and over through time, the tuning literally changes to where you don't even have to be conscious of it, and you find yourself just lifting yourself up all the time. I mean, how great would that be if you're just always like in love with yourself instead of hating on yourself? Pretty powerful stuff. And before you know it, after you do this for a while, like I said, it becomes second nature. And you don't even have to be conscious of the negative thoughts rising up. But when they do, inevitably, as they always do, you're able to wash them away. You're not allowing those thoughts to be your master. Same thing with emotions. You don't allow the emotions to be your master. Rather, the emotions are your servant, and the emotions and the thoughts serve as signals for you to self-develop. And I tell you what, when you really tap into this space and you're totally tuned in to that frequency of controlling your thoughts and leveraging or flipping the script so as to lift you up instead of tear you down, you can reach a point where, like Napoleon Hill says, that within every adversity lies the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Within every adversity lies the seed of an equal or greater benefit. What a powerful quote that is. And I just discovered this reading Romans last night, and we'll talk more about Christ and the Bible and New Testament, Old Testament, sin with old Pastor Jonathan England here, but this is pretty potent too. It's the same thing. Napoleon Hill, within every adversity lies the seed of an equal or greater benefit, and this is in Romans. Not only that, but we rejoice in our suffering, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. It's the same concept. The suffering produces endurance and builds character, okay? So when you tap into mindfulness, you can really live a life where when adversity, suffering, hardship, pain, struggle, conflict inevitably happens, as it will, you get to choose how you show up for that struggle. And when you align with what Napoleon Hill taught and the teachings of old JC, you can actually be like, wow, what do I have to learn from this pain? And in fact, and again, this is where it goes back, those limiting beliefs. I know it because I've heard it from my audience. I've seen it in the reply to our emails. I've seen it in the chat when I'm doing a webinar. Sure, easy for you to say, John. You're young. You're full of energy. You didn't have the life that I had. You weren't abused like I was abused, or whatever it may be. First of all, I've been through quite a bit of struggle myself. Not struggle like other people have had, but I want to share with folks. You can either be a victim of that struggle and let it define you. This happened to me, woe is me, and I don't want to be insensitive to people's hardship, but I want to really drive home the point that when you tap into this, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings. When you tap into adversity is the seed of benefit, then you can tap into a power that a lot of people don't have, because you've known what it's like to be down and out. You've known what it's like to feel abuse and hate, and you've taken that and you've leveraged it and turned it into your superpower. We all have the choice and the ability to do that, my friends. You just got to tap into it. So I want to encourage you guys as exercises to, through that mindfulness, here's the first step of it all. Just start to become aware of your own thought patterns. That's it. Really, that's the beginning. You can, and just because a lot of people don't notice it at all. It's just a program. We're never like, wait a second, what did I just say to myself? We're all conscious about what some a-hole over here or our significant other, ex-wife, or the guy in the street that cut us off and we looked at him ugly and he cursed us out. We're all conscious of what all these other people are saying to us, when in all reality, the most important voice that we could ever listen to is our own voice, the voice that's in our head, our inner child, our inner self, our other self, as Napoleon Hill referred to it. So I want to encourage you guys as a little to do, a takeaway, as an exercise, to just become more mindful of the soundtrack within your head and see if you can't tune it to be your biggest champion, your cheerleader, and let go of all those negative thought patterns that have been holding you back. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the work that we're doing in this world, if you're tuned into this frequency, this transmission, if you're watching from the Accelerator Zoom meeting, I'm going to hit record on here as well. If you're watching from the Accelerator chat, we got work to do, friends. We got God's work to do. Whatever that means for you, for me, it means that I've been given certain gifts and I have certain purposes on this planet, and I better live up to those purposes because there's a lot of people counting on me to do so. And in order to fulfill our destiny, whether it's some big grandiose purpose like creating self-governance for our freedom community, or maybe it's showing up better for your children because they struggled in life, or maybe it's finding the inner peace so conflict isn't so heavy with you and your wife, or whatever it may be. Maybe it's getting in shape because you have a significant other or a family member or whatever, someone in your circle of friends that got cancer, and you're like, whoa, I need to get my life together. Whatever it may be, I guarantee the number one thing that will increase the likelihood of success for you and fulfilling what it is that you want in life is learning to control your thoughts. All right. Now, I started talking about the context of money, my friends, and I want to encourage you guys to join me for a webinar. We're going to talk about tactics and strategies, but like I said, a huge bulk of the work that we're going to be doing will center around mindset. Mindset. I'll share my 4-part Make More Money framework with you guys, and the first piece of that framework has to do with getting your mind right. You can sign up today for free at livefree.academy/money. That's livefree.academy/money. It's the Make More Money webinar. It's going down September 5th. If you're watching live, that's tomorrow at 12 p.m. Central. But we're doing another session on Tuesday, September 10th. That's next week at 6 p.m. Central. Thursday the 5th at noon, or September the 10th. That's a Tuesday at 6 p.m. I hope you'll join us. It's absolutely free to join. We'll riff for a couple hours. I'll save time for questions. I'll break down my Make More Money framework. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, yes, it's true. Money won't bring you happiness, but it'll make it easier to pursue happiness. Money won't make you happy, but poverty sure as hell ain't going to make you happy either, and you get to choose. I've been poor, and I've had a decent amount of money, and I tell you what, I much prefer the latter, especially with the work that we're trying to do. It does take money to build cool things. It takes money to live a good life, and I want to encourage you guys to check this out. Plus, too, if you're like all into the freedom cause, you can make more money by providing value to other people, helping them to solve their problems, and then you could take that extra money and funnel it into cool freedom projects, because our enemies, the enemies of freedom, the predator class, they most definitely have a ton of money, and they are deploying it in crazy ways to push forward their dastardly new world order. All right, folks, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest today, Mr. Jonathan England. We're going to chat about his incredible community, about his success philosophy, about the role Christianity and spirituality has played in helping him to bring his gifts to the world. Mr. Jonathan England, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm good. It's good to see you again. We just wrapped up a webinar a couple weeks ago, huh?
Yeah, no, it went very well.
It did go well. Yeah, people were completely blown away. And I really appreciated what you had to teach, what you had to preach. So why don't you just give an introduction for folks in our audience that may not be familiar with you or your work. Who is Mr. Jonathan England?
So Jonathan England, founder of Earthwaking Outreach, which is a 508c1a nonprofit organization for purpose. Earthwaking Villages, we're building villages. Currently they're in Costa Rica. We will expand them all across the planet. But it's just this earthwaking movement. It's a shift from blame to responsibility, from victim to victor, from black hole to supernova. You're just flipping the switch, awakening to who you truly are. We were created to create in the likeness and image of God, but then we were conditioned to consume. We got programmed to, as John Bush was just sharing, all this program. We got programmed by our teachers, preachers, friends, family, media, and government, domesticated, indoctrinated to be who we're not. And so Earthwaking is about returning to who you truly are. So we've got events that we do. We've had tens of thousands of people attended our events. We do down here in Costa Rica now. We do an event called the Remember Experience. John Bush's right-hand man, Ryan, was just down here last week. We just did it, and he had quite an experience. It's not an event, it's an experience that you will remember forever. So yeah, perfect alignment, John Bush and Earthwaking. We have the same, we're tuned to the same frequency, same vision, same missions, same language. As I hear him speak, I'm like, that's me talking right there. So I love your community and love everything that you're doing and everything you stand for, John.
Right on. Right back at you, man. Maybe you could share a bit about your background, because as I was sharing earlier, there's a lot of folks, they're like, oh, I've had it rough, or this or that happened, and easy for you to say, but you had quite a bit of struggle. I understand you struggled with booze, and what'd you say? You're like a missionary atheist, or or what you were
Evangelist,
an
atheist.
evangelist. It was part of your identity to go crack people open and pull them out of their religion. But and of course you preach spirituality. It's a different ball game than an organized religion, which a lot of evil has come from. But having a relationship with spirit, with source, with God, with Christ is a totally different ballgame. But tell us about where you came from and this big eureka that you had that led to such a shift in your life.
Yeah, I mean, there's a series of points. I wrote a book called "If I Die Before I Wake," which is these 5 levels of consciousness, 5 states of conscious orientation, 5 ways to perceive reality, 5 perspectives to see it from. But there was like a series of awakenings that occurred along that journey. But I became an evangelist atheist. How that happened is when I was 12 years old and my brother was 16. My brother passed away while it's holding his hand, and in that moment, I'm like, okay, well, either like, so if there is a God, then either there's something wrong with him or there's something wrong with my family. Because why would he just kill my brother like that? So, and I'm not cool with either. So my only conclusion I could come up with, and it all happened subconscious. I didn't make this conscious decision, but it happened, and I completely disconnected myself from even the possibility of God, and then I began to worship my mind. My mind became my God. And the very first book that I ever read by choice was "Why I'm Not a Christian" by Bertrand Russell, and went off on that journey. It became a broke, ignorant, blackout drunk atheist beach bum, like literally blackout drunk pretty much every night of the week. Um, and then I was blackout drunk one night, rearing a car at a stoplight. I came to, I was like, what just happened? Where am I at? And I'm like, oh, I'm driving. And I threw my truck in reverse, tried to run, but there was a cop sitting at the stoplight that I rear-ended the car at. I got about a mile down the road, half a mile down the road to Walmart parking lot, and got pulled over and went to jail. And then sitting in jail, that's when I made a new decision. And the decision was, and how it came about was I was sitting there beating myself up. You piece of crap. You're just like, just beating myself up like we all have done. But now I can't run because I'm stuck in jail. I can't numb because I'm stuck in jail. And so I'm just stuck with myself and the voices. And it's just saying, you could have killed somebody, John. You could have killed somebody. You could have killed. I'm like, yeah, I know that. But then I finally started to listen deeper to what the voice was saying. You could have killed somebody. I'm like, yeah, I know that. And then I was like, but it keeps saying it for some reason, some message that I'm not getting. And if you ever noticed, sometimes in life when it's time to get a lesson, it shows up as a feather stroke. But if you don't receive the feather stroke, then it comes as a nudge. If you don't get the nudge, then the shove. Then if you don't get the shove, then it's the 2x4, and then the cosmic 2x4 with spikes that wipe your life out from underneath you. So you could have got the message a little bit sooner, but so I was always a stubborn guy, and it took me quite a few 2x4s before I finally got the message. So anyway, the voice is yelling at me while I'm sitting in jail, saying you could have killed somebody, and then I finally could hear what it was saying. It said, John, you could have killed somebody. I'm like, yes. And it says, if you could kill somebody, that means one of your decisions could hurt someone, correct, John? Like, because nobody got hurt, but they very well could have. And I'm like, yes, somebody could have got hurt. So if your decisions could hurt someone, guess what else your decisions could do? I'm like, well, they could help someone. Okay. So if your decisions can hurt people or help people, then that means your decisions matter, correct, John? I'm like, okay, yeah, so my decisions matter. And if your decisions matter, that means you matter then, John. I'm like, okay, yes, that's true. Oh, I matter. And I just realized it, like in that moment, this epiphany, this revelation, I was like, I actually matter. And so we have these identities that we perceive ourselves to be, and then we act accordingly. As John was talking about earlier, sin, the way that I distinguish sin is not an action to be punished, but it's the perception to be corrected. And it's the perceived separation from God, the perceived separation from love. So we form this false identity on top of ourselves, leaving what's real in the pursuit of what appears to be, leaving love, trying to find love, but you can't find it out there because you are it. And so we create these false identities. And one aspect of my false identity is that I don't matter. And so the actions that come from that, so the identity is the cause, the actions are the symptoms. And so in the world we grew up in, it's all about treating symptoms. At the pharmaceutical industry, just treating symptoms. So the cause remains so that you're hopelessly dependent forever upon this medication. And so the same thing happening, how we do anything is how we do everything. So the same thing happening where people are punished for their sin, which is their action, but it's not their action. It's the belief that's forming an identity. They perceive themselves to be worthless. And if you perceive yourself to be worthless, then you take worthless actions. I didn't think that I mattered, so it didn't matter what I did. But suddenly, as John was talking about earlier, is from Napoleon Hill's book, it's in the biggest obstacles. That's where your greatest opportunities live. And so every moment is a gift from God, even the moments that you don't like, especially the moments that you don't like. But it's your job to unwrap the gift. So while I was sitting in jail, I finally went deep enough and opened up the gift. I wasn't just looking at the surface anymore. I looked deeper and I listened. Why is the world beating the crap out of me? There's a message, and the message was that I matter. And so a new identity was born. I matter. And so if I matter, then I made a decision. I said, well, my decisions matter. I matter. Then from this moment forward, every decision that I make is going to help people, not hurt anybody. It's going to be a conscious decision. And from this moment forward, I'm going to help people, not hurt people. Sitting in jail, that's when I made that decision. That was the beginning of my awakening process. I'll pause right there and hand it back over to John.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So let me ask you this, and we can go ahead and get into some of the spiritual Christ stuff, because I'm still trying to reconcile things. And I know there was this, yeah, I guess I'm probably where Ryan was at maybe just a couple weeks ago. And now he's a completely different person. It's pretty incredible. He was a great guy before. Now he's even more great. Anyway, I was telling him to come in here. We were going to have him ride shotgun here, but he had a call that.
Oh, that'd be super cool if Ryan comes in. Yeah. I love that.
I think he's listening now. He's probably going to come over here. But there's this great woman named Lee Miltier, and she actually had this great thing that I learned at this marketing conference. She's on the spirituality and metaphysics, and she said, I don't move forward with something unless it aligns with my head, my heart, and my gut. And that's something that I've been trying to rectify when it comes to Jesus Christ, Christianity specifically, but spirituality in general. Anyway, so the question that I have for you is like, Napoleon Hill has this great book called Outwitting the Devil. And in Outwitting the Devil, you're familiar with it. We go to church on Sunday, and the church the purpose of the church, the mission is like to help people find God, to help people find freedom. That's in the context of like alleviating suffering and overcoming their demons, right? Then to help people find their purpose. And then once they've done those three things, to help encourage them to go share their gifts with the world and help other people. Really awesome mission for a church. Anyway, he talks about purpose. Then he talked about drifting. Napoleon Hill says if you don't have a definite purpose, then you'll be drifting through life, just going, doing whatever, programming, as I was just talking about. Anyway, in this book, it's a highly controversial book. It was suppressed for quite some time. His family didn't want them to release it because he says that two of the devil's number one tools are church and public education, because these two institutions put fear into people and they take away their critical thinking, putting them into a place of drifting. Anyway, my point is, in the book, he talks about he was down and out. He was fearing for his life. He thought he was going to be murdered by this like gang thing that he got caught up in indirectly. And he goes and hides out at this lake house, and he's terrified for like a year. Every time a car drives by, he's freaking out. One day he feels compelled to go on a walk. He goes on a walk near a school, and he says that his other self begins talking to him. Now, as I was listening, his other self is like, you have a mission to finish. You were working with Andrew Carnegie to catalog the strategies and mindsets of successful people, and that's your mission. That's your purpose. But you got caught off because of fear and a lack of direction. And it's this other self, as he refers to it, that's speaking to him, some external other self speaking to him, pushing him back into his mission to pursue his gifts and his purpose, his definite purpose. And I noticed, I was like, why didn't he call the other self God? God spoke to him. And I know that you've on numerous occasions said that God gave you a message. He told me to go build these communities, right? So the question I have for you today is it necessarily a different thing, or is this other self, this inner voice that speaks to us sometimes, or sometimes you can tell it's this external voice, is that God? And I'm basically just trying to justify like this rational thinking that I have about God, universe, connected, energy, love, the interconnectivity of everything. It's all one. That's how I define God. And I don't know that that's necessarily different than the Christian God as described in the Bible. What are your thoughts on that? And when you had that voice talking to you in prison, you're having this conversation with yourself. Was that God? Was that your other self? Is that the same thing? What do you got? And having read Outwitting the Devil too, why do you think he didn't just call it God? He called it his other self, but clearly it was this external thing. He refers to God as the infinite intelligence or infinite wisdom, which I think is a good way to describe it, but I'm just kind of rambling here. What are your thoughts on that?
So, like a wine connoisseur can tell you where the grapes from that wine came from. I don't know. They can distinguish all kinds of things about the wine. So in my walk with God now, I'm able to distinguish what I'm listening to now. And sometimes I'm it's rare that I'm 100% certain that God says something to me. Even like I'm one of the best I've ever met in person at distinguishing and discerning God's voice. But even me, I mean, I'll still be like it for, I'll pause with it and be with it for a while. Sometimes it's like absolutely certain, but now I've actually distinguished. I can tell when I'm listening to God the Father, uh, the Son, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. There are three specific, distinct relationships that I have with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But we are, it, there's a body, there's a soul that's inhabiting the body, and then we actually are this spirit, and there's God's spirit, man's spirit, and Satan's spirit. And so your soul is being, but it's kind of like your garden. Your soul is kind of like your garden, and you're letting it be filled with whatever seeds. And so, I mean, even in the Bible, it talks about God let King Saul think he was following God, yet he was following Satan. And so it's really it's a journey through like the answer to your question is like it takes time to develop a relationship to really discern and distinguish what it is that you're listening to, who it is that you're listening to, and get relationships with all of it. Because one of the things I say also is that people who don't have an ego, it's if you don't have an ego, it's because your ego has you. And so it's very important for you to distinguish and discern your own ego, to watch how it's manipulation tactics, its tricks, its tools, how it gets you to move in directions and do different things, to be able to really discern all those voices that are in your head and in your heart. But it's like you learn the alphabet, and then you learn sentences, and then you learn paragraphs, and then you learn stories. So it is a journey. But when I really got the connection with God, initially it was God the Father. So when you said about the moment when I was in jail, that was God calling me forth. Still, I didn't have any sort of relationship, but I was listening to at that point. I wouldn't have been able to take that back. It was moving forward once I developed the relationship. Now, once I get to know, now I hear your voice. If I would have heard your voice on, a podcast or something a year ago, I would not have known I'm listening to John Bush. Now, when I hear John Bush, I'm like, that's John Bush. So on that journey, but when I very first, it was the God the Father was the first one that spoke to me, and I knew who it was. And that's who I actually handed over my mind to, was God the Father. But how it started was there was, asking you shall receive. I was asking for it. I'm like, dude, I'm done with this world. I'm done with, I don't need this world anymore. I just want to know the truth. And you know me, God, if you're there, you're going to have to show me in a way that there's no way that I can deny this. And it was a crazy story, but this prophet showed up into my reality and I get a phone call. The whole story is really wild, but I'm not going to take the time to go into detail. But the guy calls me. I just met him the night before in a storage shed. This guy calls me. He's like, oh, something's coming over me. God's got a message for you. I'm like, well, dude, if God's got a message for me, he can come to me directly. He doesn't have to, I don't need to hear it through you. That's what my ego was saying. But it is coming to me directly, but directly through another person. And I was like, all right, where are you at? And I went and met the guy. But on my way to go meet the guy, I called my dad up who lived in Kentucky. I was in Florida. Like, hey, if you never hear from me again, I'm going to meet this strange dude, this big redneck dude that I met in a storage shed. I'm meeting him at Walmart parking lot. So if you never hear from me again, check the cameras at Walmart parking lot because that dude's probably going to be wearing my skin later. Like, I mean, I was serious. I was ready. It's like there's at least 50% chance that I'm heading to my death. And in a way, I did head to my death. But
Ha.
I go the guy. He sticks me in his car. Starts. Turns the car on. He says, "Shut the door." I'm like, and I'm an all in guy, right? So I'm like, "Let's go." And I'd sit in. I shut the door. He turns on the car, starts rocking back and forth and speaking in tongues. And I hadn't been around that yet. And so he's speaking in tongues and puts the car in gear and he says, "God really loves you. God really loves you." And I'm sitting there like, I hope so. And so, but you were talking about mindfulness earlier
Wow.
and being present. Like that was the most mindful I've ever been sitting in that car. I'm like, I'm just waiting because if he says one thing, because I was evangelist atheist, so I had a highly trained bullshit spotter and I was waiting. I'm like, he's going to say one word and I'm like, I'm out. And I'll go jump out of this car, even if we're driving 50 miles down the road. I'm out. Like, and I was just perfectly present. And I'm like, okay, that's true. That's true. 45 minutes, this guy drives me around. I don't even know where we're going. And I'm like, that's true. Okay, that's true. How's he know that? How's he know? He starts talking about my childhood. He starts talking about my parents, my grandparents. But then he shares with me that in 3 days, God's going to come and ask for your life. And if you give it to him, he's going to give you a favor, but you can never take credit for anything ever again. And so after he drops me off, I get out of the car. I went to one of my old. I was still new to Bible and all that kind of stuff. I was pretty naive, and so I called one of this Opie Taylor kind of guy who led a Wednesday evening Bible study. He's a good friend of mine. I'm like, hey man, what do you know about people speaking in tongues and prophecies and all this stuff? And he's like, yeah, it's all in the Bible, but it does say that a false prophet should be put to death. And he said it's going to happen in 3 days. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, that's easy. In 3 days, you're going to know either this is the real thing or you need to get as far away as you get from this dude. And then 3 days later, that's when it occurred. And that's when I realized that my mind was my God because I was asked to lay down my mind that day. Because previously I'd been playing chess with life. Like if I do that, then that'll happen. If that'll happen, then I can do that. Ooh, but this could happen, so I prepare for that. And I always had the game plan I was preparing for. But when God asked for my life, I was like, well, what are you going to do with it? He didn't give me an answer. So I'm like, well, how am I going to? I'm not until you tell me what you're going to do. I can't tell you what I'm going to do. But that was the whole point is I needed to say yes without knowing what I was saying yes to, because that's what I needed to do. Is I couldn't receive God because I was worshiping my mind. My mind was my God, this little meat bag, and God can't fit in this little meat bag. Like most people, you're never going to see God because God's too big. And so at some point, he's going to have to show you something you can't believe in order for you to believe something that you can't see. And that's what happened that night. And I was like,
Uh-oh. I think you froze there, Mr. J.E. It looks like you got a bad connection there. Oh, and he's back. He's back, ladies and gentlemen. There you go. Okay, all right. That night you were saying, go ahead.
I was, so I'm thinking like, what's worst case scenario? And that's when I came to the conclusion. I was like, if God's asking me to just be a vegetable, give up all my cognitive function to where I just I'm stuck in a bed and drooling in myself and can't move. That was the most terrifying thing that I could come up with. I'm like, if that's what you're asking me to do, can I do that? And I was like, well, if this is God, and I know this body's going to die. I know this little meat bag's going to shrivel up and turn to nothing one day. Like I know that. So if I'm going to die, why would I wait? God's going to have me anyway. If this is really God, he's going to have me anyway. So why would I wait? And I couldn't come up with a single logical answer on why I would wait. And I was like, okay, even if it's that's what I'll do. And I said yes, not knowing what I'm saying yes to. And that was the moment. I always say life is an 18-inch journey from the head to the heart, from the mind through the emotions to the heart, from slavery to freedom, from Egypt to the promised land. As Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. In that instant, I entered into the kingdom of God. I dropped out of my head. I no longer was worshiping my mind. I no longer needed to know. And from that moment forward, I could hear the Father speaking very clear. And it was miracles just started occurring, just like He said, and so that now there's quite a journey after that because again I was a little baby and new and just developing a relationship with the Father. I didn't have a relationship with the Son or the Holy Spirit or anything just yet, and I went on a really wild journey for all that to develop.
Good stuff, man. So before you met this guy, it was like a day or two before that you were like, if this is all legit, then send me a message.
Yeah, 3 days. It's 3 days. It was actually on my birthday, January 22nd, 2015. Well, I met the guy January 21st, 2015. I was at a storage shed. Well, actually, I was at a church parking lot. I used to be in a punk rock band, and I had a friend who was in a reggae band. We had split ways for a while because I became a very successful real estate investor. We worked on the beach together and we played shows together, but I went down the path of success. I became very successful, made millions of dollars doing real estate, and then was like, I mean, it wasn't what I was looking for. It didn't make me happy. In fact, like all the people around me and my family is all getting more. The more I gave everybody everything they wanted, the more miserable everybody got. So I'm like, this can't be the answer either. So that's when I started, like my pendulum swung and I went all in on spirituality. But so I'd gone down that whole path, and now my friend had done the same thing, but he built the largest taxi cab company in our city, and then he was like, that's not it either, and he went down spirituality, and then our paths come back together at this one church parking lot, and he's like, hey, do you still play music? I'm like, no, not really. He's like, why don't you come to my storage shed and where I paint my taxi cabs? I've got a recording studio in there, and we can jam out for a little while. And so we're just in there jamming out, and we're in there for a couple hours, and then we're done, and then all of a sudden this dude starts clapping, and he's standing in the storage shed with us, and we're like, what the heck? And he's like, I've been here for 20 minutes, you didn't even see me. He's like, that's great, y'all. And then my friend was like, I gotta go, and I talked to the dude for maybe 2 minutes, and I gave him my business card that had my phone number on it. And the very next day, I was in a meditation. I was in a meditation group. It was on my birthday, and I was doing in a meditation group. I come out of meditation, my phone rings, and I never answer the phone unless I know who it is. But I heard something say, "Answer the call." I'm like, "What? Answer the call? What are you talking about?" So I answer it, and that's when the dude pops up and is like, "Oh, something's come over me. God's got a message for you." I'm like, "What? Whatever." But it was pretty wild. And I got all kinds of wild stories since then.
Good stuff. Okay, well, let me ask you this, and this is something Nancy Combe is asking in the YouTube chat. Shout out to all the folks watching on YouTube, and of course, shout out to the Accelerator members. For Accelerator members, you can ask questions in the Q&A. If you got any questions, we'll take your question priority, ask in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll do some after hours here with Jonathan here in just a bit. But shout out to Nancy in the YouTube audience. She said, and I'm going to expand on this question, is our other self or higher self the Holy Spirit within us? Is the Holy Spirit within us our God self? And Joseph saying, I had to ask the same thing. And let me ask you this, because I was at a concert, and now, mind you, I had some booze, not a ton of booze, but they were pouring the drink strong. And I had some of my cannabis gummies. So I was like elevated, but still, I don't drink all the time, but I don't like get in some crazy altered state when I'm drinking. It was at a Grateful Dead. It was actually a cover band, Dead and Company, at the Sphere in Vegas. Huge, giant Sphere screen. And like the moment I walked in the room, I immediately was just hit with a hardcore wave of emotion about seeing, I don't know how many people there, maybe 7,000, 10,000 people. It's a huge little stadium Sphere. And like I immediately was hit with a wave of emotion about how could this many people be so connected, experiencing so much peace and love. It's like great hippie jam music, Grateful Dead. And at the same time, in this planet, there's like all this death and destruction happening in Gaza. That was like the first wave that I had. And then as I was sitting there, I just started getting real emotional, which I do sometimes with music. I started thinking about the relationship I had with my ex-wife, and that's in part because I got exposed to the Grateful Dead through my divorce attorney, who was a big Deadhead. And I'd listened back in the day, but I never really like dove deep into it. But I did, and it helped me get through some of my adversity. which I leveraged in order to become a better father and now a better husband for my lovely wife, Rebecca. But I went through hell. Still times that hell springs up with that divorce. But either way, I was highly emotional. And then as the time went on, towards the end, I felt the interconnectivity of every single person in that room, and I think that they were deliberately doing that as part of the show because they started rolling out this bass that I believe was under the seats, and the bass was woo, woo, and they created a literal vibration. But in that moment, I felt the interconnectivity of all things, everyone in that space, and then it like expanded outward. And then shortly after, I got this message, and I identified it as my other self. I don't know if it was God. It could be other self, could be whatever. This will go to Nancy's question. But the message was like, you and Rebecca have gifts to give to the world. You have work to do. And you need to get your shit together and stop dealing with stress in a negative way and get healthy and take your health more seriously and not have these unhealthy habits that you're struggling with. And I was like, and it was like just such a clear thing. And it felt external. So to tie in with Nancy's question, is our other self or our higher self the Holy Spirit within us? I identified it as my other self, much like that message that Napoleon Hill got. I didn't feel the Father. I did feel like it was a message from God. It was like something like, get your shit together, dude. You know? Do you have any insights on that? And can you hit on Nancy's question too? Like, is it the Holy Spirit? What is it? Just us, a subconscious knowing that we could do better, telling us that? Is it all the same? You got anything to riff on
that? It's a yes and no and it's all of that. So I can't tell for sure who it is that you're talking to. I mean, people like talking to spirits. I mean, demons are spirits. So I'm spiritual. Okay. Yeah, demons are spirits too. So what spirit are you actually listening to? We don't know for sure exactly what it is that you're hearing. Now, in truth, like I always say that, it's not that there's only one God, it's there is only God. And as the Bible says, in him we live and move and have our being. There's no spot that God is not. That's all that actually exists in truth. But there's the truth, there's reality, and there's your truth. And you got to go through reality back to the truth. A lot of people will put the truth on top of their truth, which now they're doubly delusional, believing they've got the truth, but they don't have it. Like it's layered on top of their lies, like putting lipstick on a pig versus actually coming through reality and receiving it that way. Now, so on your question, this will be helpful I know that answer that I just shared wasn't much help for that, but this will be more helpful as much as I can give to you. So when there's a light that goes into a prism, it comes out as a rainbow. And as the rainbow, there's like infinite colors in the rainbow. But how many lights are there? There's only one light. And so that light is God. The rainbow, that's our souls. And so sometimes you can't even know for sure, but the question is this heading you back towards the light, or is it taking you away from the light? If it's taking you away from the light, then it's some sort of like your ego, some sort of like, you're heading, it's not the wrong direction. It's just not the direction that you really want to go in. But if it's bringing you back towards the light, then it's God calling you. Now, I don't know which expression it is that you're listening to as you're hearing. It could be your higher self. It could be the Holy Spirit. It could be Jesus Christ. It could be God. I mean, along the journey, so this was something that God shared with me when he told me that after I gave up my life, he said, okay, great. Here's the next day. Here's what I'm going to use your life for. Reinvent the monetary system, reinvent the educational system, and uniting religions. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Uniting religions, smash them all together and turn them into one? He's like, no. I created them all. Why would I want to get rid of them? He's like, I just want them to know that I'm the head of them. They kicked me out. And so as he shared with me as I've gone along, that was 10 years ago. So I've been going on this journey, but one of the things that he shared with me, he says there's infinite paths to God, but there's only the one door. And so there's all, like, you can be being called, like I would have never made it home without Buddhism. I would have never made it without Hinduism, without like without New Age, without like all the, I had to go through all that stuff, but all those, it's like relative to where you are. Everything is relative. Like David Hawkins' level of consciousness, his map of consciousness, there's shame and guilt and apathy, and then fear. And if you're down in shame and guilt and apathy, fear is a really great thing for you. So all lessons are not for all people all the time. So it's relative to where you are. So if you're, pretty close on your way home, back through the door into the remembering of our oneness, our infinite connection, then you could be like something that I would be hearing. It would be Satan for me, but it could be God for you because it's bringing you home, but it'd be pulling me away. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's different. It's unique for all people. And I appreciate what you're sharing about it's not the one God. It's just it is God. And I think I guess God was always love, but really JC manifested that, Jesus Christ, and showed that, demonstrated that on earth in this physical plane as opposed to the spiritual realm. So I guess one good question, if it is having to do with God or your journey with God's work, whatever stage someone may be at with that relationship or that connection, or just that remembering, right? Or just returning to the status quo. We just lost our way. Would be, is it bringing me closer to love? Is it bringing me closer to that which is good? That's a good indication. But again, there could be trickery, false prophet, like you shared. Let me ask you this. And again, if you got questions in the accelerator, we always give priority questions to the folks that are watching the accelerator. If not, we'll just keep cruising. Everybody's just jamming along. We got a couple dozen people watching on YouTube. Some questions are rolling out too. Old Manitti's joining there too. He says, "Your truth equals BS. You'll know it by its fruit." That's his that's one of his big takeaways. He's been riffing on. You'll know by its fruit. And at the end of the day, it's like
that's a JC quote.
Yeah, it's like, why not? If life's better, if I'm feeling at peace. But let me ask you guys, this is one of my big, what do you call it? Not a proof, but one of my big rationalizations about the whole Yahweh thing. Do you even identify Yahweh, the Christian God of the Old Testament, Yahweh? Is that something that you vibe with, or is it just God? Do we need to draw a distinction? I know it's just a name.
That's the relationship with the Father. What you're in each it's all one, right? So we're all one, and there's unique expressions of it, and so that the Trinity, that would be distinguishing the Father, and there's a specific relationship that I have with the Father that's unique from my relationship with Jesus and with the Holy Spirit, and then with other, with Krishna, with Buddha, with with you, with all the beings along this journey. Of this just remembering, and I completely I understand where, like, if I would have heard me talking 10 years ago, just because I'm saying John right now is saying Jesus or God, I would have turned it off. I would have said, this guy's an idiot, not going to listen to another word he has to say, because he obviously doesn't know what he's talking about, because even if he even thinks that Jesus could be real or anything, it would completely shut me down. So Jesus came because the distance between God and man was too great. And then the rest, each of us that are then become fishers of men. Once we've been caught, then we came because the distance between man and Jesus was too great. And so I understand where everybody is along that. So the harvest field, the people that I've actually been called to catch, are the ones who've left, that are like, they got hurt by the church. They got hurt by people banging them over the head with a Bible, cramming stuff down their throat, and they're like, this isn't it. Because they went to church to get God, but they got a man standing on stage trying to be God, playing God. And so I get it. And I've got this infinite compassion for wherever anybody is along that journey. I've got this space, because wherever you are, I've been there. Now, I mean, I literally went to hell for all of eternity through this whole journey. And that's actually where I met. That's when I formed my relationship with Jesus, was actually, I was in hell for all of eternity. And eternity is not time without end. It's timelessness. There is no time there. And so because I was so stubborn, because I was so hard-headed, because I was need to know so strong, like I had to go to hell. And I know even people who are listening right now, I even understand, like, I know, even hearing me say that, I know what you would be thinking, like, depending on where you are in the journey, on how you hear what I just said there. But I just letting everybody know that if you can hear my voice right now, you're heading home. You're on your way home. All that pain, all the suffering, all the weight on your shoulders, it's gonna start as long as you allow yourself, just let go and let God, let love, and you allow it, just gonna start cleansing and purifying. And there's the journey. I mean, all that pain, there's pain in you, and it's gonna have to come back out. I always say it's the 18-inch journey from the mind through the emotions to the heart. You can't go around them. You're stuck on the wrong side of the river right now. You're stuck on the wrong side of time right now in your perception, not in reality, not in truth, but in your perception. And so this world is just our mirror. You hear me. The only time people show up into my world or I show up into theirs is when they're ready for the truth. I am specifically now my core competency, what God has created me for, is for people who love the truth and want to live the truth, not just talk with God, but walk with God. And that's who God sends my voice out to be able to hear the people. So for the people to hear, so I'm the aspect of them that is remembering, hey, you know what? I'm ready to return to the kingdom. And if you want to enter the kingdom, you have to enter like a child, which means you're going to have to stop worshiping your mind. You're going to have to stop worshiping your body. And it's a surrender. And it's the most incredible experience to just surrender, sovereign, and then surrender. A lot of people say, I want to give my life to God. I'm like, well, you can't, because you don't have it. You got to take it back first. And so that's the sovereignty aspect, taking it back first, taking it back from your teachers, preachers, friends, family, media, government, all the programming, all the habits, all the patterns, and owning it completely, and then putting it all on the altar and handing it over. And then I always say salvation is a point, freedom is a process. So it takes time for the purification. But once you've made the decision, I'm coming home, and you just say, all right, I can't fix this. You can't solve a problem at the level of consciousness that created it. I've tried and tried. No matter what I do, it's never enough. And I'm tired of knowing what suffering is, and I'm tired of knowing what love isn't. And I want to know the truth. And when you ask, you shall receive, and you can open your heart. And the doorway, Jesus said, like pretty much all religions agree that Jesus is a way. But Jesus says, I am the way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So there's all these pathways, but if you want to come home, there's a doorway, and you'll walk through him. And, when you see him, if you see anything other than God, that means you still haven't been purified just yet. It's just, there's still lies in your eyes. There's still a cleansing to do. And all you got to do is just say, yes, I don't know how to do this. I can't solve this problem that we made the problems up. We did the whole thing. And so it's owning that, taking responsibility for it. Okay, I can't fix this. And not my will, but thine be done. And then you just get to surrender. And then you're just going to get to, grace takes your place. And suddenly you start to experience freedom. You start to wake up from the happy dream instead of having to go deeper into a nightmare and get your pounded to wake you up.
All right, right on. This is something that I'm having trouble wrapping my head around as far as the God the Father. So the Old Testament, right, and the Jews worshipped Yahweh. And the Old Testament, I don't know if it goes back, 2000 BC, 2500, 1700, whatever it may be, in that range. Right, so you have Christ, BC, Old Testament, before it was even the book, the Old Testament book. It's the covenant with God, right? The Abrahamic covenant. Before then, it's kind of like if the tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it or see it, does it fall kind of deal. Before then, there were other gods, and specifically talking about paganism, right? I don't know if you've ever seen this Vikings show. It's really freaking good, and it has a whole lot to do with the Vikings coming
Oh, yeah,
into
I love
power.
that show.
Oh, my God. And I was so fascinated, and this is actually one of the things that brought me deeper to explore Christ and Christianity and the Bible, because that show not only explores the Vikings and how they worked and their own internal conflict, but it really, like, one of the story arcs is paganism in contrast with Christianity. And the main character accepts Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior because he's so close with one of these monks. Anyway, it talks, they have, it shows a lot of the similar overlap of paganism merging into, and of course what happened with Constantine and making it more palatable so that Christianity could spread. A lot of same traditions. and they call Odin All Father, the Father, but there's other gods. And so I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this Christian God, but maybe it's just, it's not that it's the one true God. It just is God, everything, all-encompassing, all everywhere, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, love, energy. But it's like before the Christian God was iterated, communicated, worship, there were other gods, not just paganism, going back far to Hinduism, right, which has its own belief system. I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around that. Before
I got a
God
couple
was to
things.
be worshipped. Yeah, what do you got?
So first of all, time is an illusion. So we're eternal beings, not time-based beings. Now, if you perceive yourself to be, you've identified as your body. That's why it says, "From dust you came, to dust you shall return." It's a battle between spirit and flesh. You're not your body. You're an eternal. So the awakening is when you realize that you're not a human being having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. So there is no time. Time's illusion. As Jesus showed up, he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." And so even as you watch the Bible, it's a journey through the levels of consciousness. It's like taking people into fear, into all the things that you have to process inside of yourself. You go through the journey. The Bible begins in the garden and it ends in the garden, but it goes through this journey through all those emotions. And so all the things that happened in time, again, time is an illusion, but it's just those are all pieces of us remembering and of us waking up. And so in A Course in Miracles, which is um, a text that it's Jesus speaking, and he says there's nothing in me that does not come from God. The only difference between me and you now is in me there's nothing else. And so that's that narrow gate of, you've got, like, none of your souvenirs are going to fit through. Nothing, you can't take anything with you, any time-based thing with you. And so all that stuff, we went through all of this stuff, but all this stuff was just a dream. It wasn't ever actually real. And as we get more, so we're all one, but we're not the same. Sameness and oneness are not the same. But as we start to get closer to the oneness, as the Bible says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So all the double-mindedness, all the different paths, they start to kind of like, it starts to subside. And then you start to hone in, and you can start to see that you are the reflection. So Jesus showed up as 100% God and 100% man. And he is the way, because he came because the distance between us and God was too great. We didn't know. We're trying to do it. We're trying to do our way to God. That's all that we had with the Old Testament. And all religions are ways to do your way to God, but you can't do your way there. You have to cleanse your mind. And so he takes the last step for you. He cleanses your mind as you walk through, because you have to completely surrender. You have to completely let go. Like, I know, like, as people that would do like ayahuasca or like the toad, as you go into the toad, there's like a door that you got to step through. And it's like, no, I don't want to go through this door. I don't know. But if you can just surrender, let go, on the other side is bliss. So that's
real
that's
quick,
a very
just to tap in. I did ayahuasca, and I had this first of all, there was an external voice. It's called the mother, is what people reference it, right? The mother, this feminine energy speaking to you, guiding you. And I felt it external, and it was pulling me. It wasn't like mushrooms or LSD where it's just psychedelic and sure, you got some, heightened sense of awareness of nature and whatever. It was like external force pulled me out of my own consciousness, physical plane, put me in my hovering above my bed at my home, seeing a mess that I had in my house. And that was a huge takeaway. The medicine I got was like, my life's a fucking mess. And this mess spills over onto everybody around me. And I need to get my shit together, because not only is it affecting me poorly, it's affecting other people. But as I was in that external plane, I started to rationalize, wait a second, I'm at my friend's house laying down on the floor. How can I simultaneously be at my house? I didn't surrender. I went, and then immediately at that point, when I started rationalizing, I came back into my body. Now, I still had a great experience and all these deep thoughts, but I feel like had I surrendered at that time, just the same, if I can humble myself enough to surrender completely to JC, had I done that, then it would have been the experience that I maybe deserved. Maybe I don't deserve it yet because I'm still stuck in my damn head. Anyway, that's just what came up for me as you were saying, like a true surrender. I came back into this physical realm, into this rational, logical thought because it didn't make sense with my physical, my understanding of how the world works. But maybe I need to remember how the world really does work.
Yeah, because like you can't fix your own mess. Again, you can't solve the problem at the level of consciousness that created it. So that surrender, if you had surrendered, you would have stepped through the door, but it's the back door. Like if you're using medicines, that you're getting in the back door and then you get kicked back out. And you're like, oh, and then you're back out again. And you're like, well, what do I do now? I guess I got to go do the medicine again. But it's just it's a taste. All these things are a taste of like all the different fragmented aspects, but you're returning to oneness. You're returning. So death, hell, the eternal hell was eternal fragmentation, disintegration, because we're eternal beings and there's nothing you can do about that. So you're either going to be an eternal heaven or eternal hell. And that's the difference between that is eternal life or eternal death. And the difference between the two is like, if you like once a plant dies, it starts to disintegrate. It starts to, it's fragmenting. It's no longer in form. It's like disintegrating. And that's what happened when I was in eternal hell. It was eternal disintegration, fragmentation, forever, never ending. Versus when you're coming home, you're reintegrating. You're coming back into divine order, the divine design. So the Father is, there's masculine and feminine. The feminine is the flow, the masculine is the form. And so the Father puts everything into form. He informed everything. He spoke it into existence with his word. He brought it into form. And so it's information. So he informed our spirit on how to move. And if we go out of alignment with that, we disintegrate. So all these pieces, we've got all these pieces that are disintegrated out there that are throughout time, which is an illusion. And we can collect all the pieces. Hey, look, this piece looks like that piece, and it looks like that. And you can start to, like, it's the awakening process. You're starting to get the pieces, but even the collective, what happens to the individual happens to the collective over the illusion of time. We've collectively been preparing ourselves to return home, to receive, and then 2,000 years ago, okay, we're ready now. And the doorway shows up, the truth shows up, says, okay, great. Now you've made a mess inside of your own mind, and here, I'll cleanse it for you because I have right-mindedness. I have correct perspective. He was the only sinless person who's ever walked this earth. He literally walked the earth, but he walked sinlessly, meaning he had a perfect right-mindedness, a holy perspective the entire time. He never had the perceived separation from God, and he never perceived us as separate from God. Even though we perceived ourselves that way, there's in this side of eternity and time, Jesus died for our sins to cleanse them. But in truth, when you actually step through the door, he lives for our innocence because he didn't die. That's the whole point. He's alive, and so are we, and we're actually still innocent because what did Judas actually do? Nothing. We're not punished for our sin. We're punished by our sin. Judas didn't kill Jesus. Judas killed himself because he thought he killed Jesus. But Jesus is like, you didn't kill me. That's the whole point. You're still innocent. You just have to wake up, and I can write your mind for you. You can't write it for yourself because you're lost. You can't see the picture inside of it. But I can correct it for you. I can correct your perspective for you, and you can return like a child. And then he's your brother, and we're all frolicking in the field together.
Right on. Oh, and so you identify sin as being separate. It's a false perspective of separateness from God or the one or the interconnectivity. Or I always come back to energy because
love. So my definition or distinction for love is infinite connection. So you can't create connection. You can just create the illusion of separation by living in lies. And we remove the lies from your eyes, and then you remember the infinite connection that was already there, which is love. And as the Bible says, those who don't know love don't know God, for God is love.
Okay. And let's talk. I want to bring it back to the community. We got folks asking questions on the community. I want to spend more time on that, but this is important stuff, of course. And the community embodies this ethos. Wouldn't some Christians take offense to this concept that you put forward of creating heaven on earth or heaven internally? And to bring it back earlier, I said, I have this struggle with the mind mostly with the mind. My heart, I know, is there because like when I go to church, oftentimes they got the gospel music and it's like it's a jam band. The one we go to in Christian Life Austin in Austin, and I just immediately have a wave of emotion. I feel emotional, like I felt emotional listening to you talk. I felt emotional reading the Bible. I know my heart's there. My gut says something different about the modern understanding of Christianity, that you have to repent and kingdom, Jesus Christ will return someday and heaven is this external thing. I'm kind of vibing with some of what the Gnostics say about knowing oneself, and then this idea the kingdom of heaven is within. And like you're saying, heaven on earth, it's not something that we wait for, especially if time doesn't exist, right? And there's also this other meme I saw online that was like, Christ returning is really you returning to Christhood or Christ consciousness. What are your thoughts on all that? Heaven on earth, wouldn't some Christians say that's blasphemous? And is it really just when we realize that we're not separate, that's when Christ comes back within us? Or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, plenty of people, whatever, if they're religious, like which religion is like, it's about your works. Like, what are you doing? And that's the whole purpose of Jesus. It's not about what you do. It's about what he did. It's not about your works. It's already done. And just let yourself receive, he paid the bill. Just let yourself receive it. You can't learn or earn your way into heaven. You're actually already there. You just don't know it. And the more you try to get there, the more you're leaving what's real in the pursuit of what appears to be. Just relax and let him handle this. Let him wake you up. But as far as that, like Jesus literally said, the kingdom of God is within you. But then the Lord's Prayer, yeah, and plenty of Christians they get offended, like if they're doing it for the wrong reasons. Like the whole one of the main things that Jesus did his first go around was to dismantle religion. He's like, y'all are over here cleaning the outside of the cup, leaving the inside dirty. If you clean the inside, the outside will get cleansed automatically. You're just doing it to look good. You're doing it. You can't do it. You got to be it. And so people, they get offended about all kinds of stuff. It does, like everybody tries to put me in a box. Like, what box is he in? And they get offended about whatever. Like, I don't fit in a box. Jesus didn't fit in a box. God doesn't fit in a box. And so now Jesus is going to be returning in physical form. That is actually happening because it appears without, though it is within. The metaphysical is moving the physical, just like, the world is just our mirror. So it's just like as Hitler showed up. Hitler was a physical manifestation of the fears inside of the people, the victim mentality that so many people were holding. And so there has to be an answer to that. It's every thought is a prayer. Every thought that you hold on to is a prayer. So when you got a collective of people in terror, there has to be, because we've been given the full power of God. How we know we've been given the full power of God is because we've created suffering, hell, evil, all the things that don't exist in God's kingdom. Death doesn't exist in God's kingdom. Suffering doesn't exist. Evil doesn't exist. So somehow we're living in a world that isn't God's kingdom, which means that's how we know we've been given the full power of God. So we're created to create. And so we can create experiences for ourselves. Even though they're not real, we can make it more real than real. Even though it's a lie, the whole world of suffering and sin and death and evil, it's all a lie, but we've bought into it. And so we're making it more real than real. So we have that full power that we've turned against ourselves. So there had to be a Hitler show up because of the collective consciousness. There's always a physical manifestation, and there'll be a point where it's all coming to. So as we're coming home, like this split that's occurring where it's decision time. Jesus came the first time to, say, hey guys, here you go. I got you a new, here's a way home. And then he's coming back around, but it's for us. We get to make a decision, because if you choose not to decide, you made a choice. We've already decided to be separate from God, but now we can make a new decision to come home. And so he's going to come and honor our decisions, but it's the physical manifestation of what's going on collectively inside of us. There has to be a physical representation of the Christ returning inside of us. So with all that, back to your other question about establishing on earth, the kingdom of God on earth as is in heaven, heaven on earth. That's literally what the Lord's Prayer, on earth as it is in heaven. It's not about going to heaven. It's about bringing heaven down. That's the whole purpose why God created us in the first place. The Bible it's a book about a king, a kingdom, a royal family, and the colonization of a foreign land called earth. And so God created creation. He created the creatures, and he created the creators, which are us. And he says, now take dominion over this, because earth gives heaven expression and heaven gives earth meaning. So we were created as these creators to take dominion over creation, but instead we followed creation. And so now we're returning to for creation to start following us again, but that can only happen if we follow God. And when we submit, which means place ourselves under the authority of, we submit to the creator of creation, then us creators, creation then submits to us, and then it's restored to God's original intent, his divine design. He created from the get-go, he created creation, creatures, and the creators, and for us to colonize earth, to bring heaven to earth. That's the whole purpose in the beginning, and God always gets what he wants. So in the end, that's why the Bible begins in the garden and it ends in the garden, where we're now reconciled, received our king, and then we become king of our thing, because he's the king of kings, and then we all become kings of our things and queens of our scenes, and we do whatever it is that whatever member we are of the body, whatever color of the rainbow that we are, all work interdependently and get to experience earth on earth as it is in heaven, just as Jesus said, just as God said in the beginning.
Whew, lots to unpack there. All right. Well, I
didn't know we were going to be talking about that stuff today. Like John just let me, hey, you want to do a podcast on Wednesday? I'm like, sure. And he never told me anything about what we're going to be talking about or anything like that. So,
well, let's go. This is the good stuff. Everything else is just surface level. But let's talk about, I know some folks were excited to hear more about Earthwaking. I really think you're leading by example on that front. But let's talk about how you are working to create heaven on earth with Earthwaking Village. What's it all about? How's it in the private realm? Tell us about the community. And we had a couple questions that I want to hit you on.
Yeah, so again, on earth as it is in heaven, that's our core. That's what God created as creators, to take dominion over creation, to colonize earth as his kingdom. And so he's deployed us as creators and kings to take dominion. And he says, be fruitful and multiply, take new territory. And so, but it has to be in divine design and right order. And so currently the earth the territory has been taken by Satan. Like it happened in the garden. Adam was made king, given full power over creation. And then Eve is there to support, assist, to to connect and create and contribute with each other. And then she follows creation, and then he follows her. And so that serpent then is now built Babylon, the whole world that we grew up in, all this dysfunction, all this corruption, everything, the whole world, it's literally Satan's kingdom. But remember, it's just a lie. It was a liar, and we bought the lie, and then we built the liar's kingdom for him, and then imprisoned ourselves in there. And so now, the only way out is through death. You have to, like Jesus said, if you want to follow me, you got to hate your family, you got to hate your children, you got to hate your life. You got to lay it all down. If you will lay it all, like those who love their life will surely lose it, but those who lay their life down for me, they will receive eternal life. So we face it within or without, by chance or by choice. We're going to die. But the question is, are you going to do it by chance or by choice? And you can die by choice and lay your life down, that's what happened whenever God came to me. I laid my life down, like it's not mine, but yours, which here's the whole time. I was just in the illusion that it wasn't. And now I'm back in right-mindedness, right relationship. And then he's been directing me. I take orders from headquarters, and he's like, okay, here's how my kingdom operates. Let's restore earth because we're birthing the new earth as we're preparing for the end of the illusion of time. He's establishing the new earth. And just like it says in the Bible, that's the new earth is not a new age term. That's a Bible term that is establishing the new earth. That's what happens at the end of the illusion of time. And so we're establishing it under his divine design and his divine order. Now, in that thing, God has given us like different tools and things like that to relate to the old world, so the old world can actually relate to us and understand, oh, okay, I know what you're doing. So some of the things he did, God gave us a 508. He gave us private membership associations, things like this. But really, the 508 is the most important. It doesn't do anything. The 508 doesn't do anything for you. What you do is when you submit to God, then now once you've submitted to God, you cannot let man get in between you and God. You can't let if you do that, you've bowed to the beast, you bowed to Babylon, so you have to stay submitted to God. And so he's actually given us mechanisms. The 508 is a representation of our submission to God. And so we've built everything inside of that. So now the old world recognizes, okay, great. You're not under our laws, you're above our laws now. But it's in there, they've agreed with it inside of their laws. We agreed this is okay, this is for people who are submitted to God, and we can't get in between their relationship with God. So we'll step out of that. We don't want to mess with that, because if we mess with that, it messes up our thing. If we start, they actually can't, because it's all part of God's divine design. So anyway, we're down here in Costa Rica right now. Again, we'll expand. We'll be taking new territory, just as God has said from the beginning. So the whole new earth, like there's a split happening, and the worlds are splitting. Hell on earth and heaven on earth are about to occur. But it's like these two different trains that are splitting right now, and whichever one you're on when it happens, that's where you go. And so there's the world that if you're hearing my voice, you're most likely on the world that will remain cleansed of the sins. Now the sins will be cleansed off, and the people that are holding on to it, but then there's a world that remains that's just peace, love, and joy, and we're children frolicking in the garden, and working interdependently as members of the body of God on earth as he is in heaven. And so we're building these villages down here. We got our own sovereign food, water, shelter, energy, community, currency. So we're not dependent upon the sick system, the beast, the Babylon, that as they start to deploy the CBDC and all the crazy stuff that they're doing over there. That's all part of the plan. God said all that was going to happen. It's not like there's no need to be afraid of it, and there's no need to fight against it, because you're fighting against it. You're literally fighting against God, because God said this is what's going to happen. You just get to decide, which team you're going to be on. Are you going to be on God team? And even when you say on team, like, we're not here to take that. We're not against that. We're not against lies. It's like, because lies are just illusions. There's no need to be against the lie. You just stand as the truth, and then the lies can't penetrate you. They can't do anything. So we're just standing down here as truth. We're preparing for peace. A lot of people are preparing for war. Yeah, well, that's what you're going to get. But we're preparing for peace, and how you prepare for peace is, if there's a war within, there's always going to be a war without. So we end the war within by taking 100% responsibility for our reality inside and out. And we do different processes down here, where we have a game called Dysfunction, where we put the fun in dysfunction. Everybody's dysfunctional, but everybody's pretending like they're not, because they're ashamed of it. And so we actually have fun and cough up these fur balls and bring it out. And if it's in any of us, it's in all of us to some degree. So we all we got a little bucket we call it the litter box, where the shit goes in there. How you know you got shit is if you experience anything other than peace, love, and joy. That the fruit of the Spirit is peace, love, and joy. Fruit of the Spirit of God, that means you have to have a lie in your eye, fear in your ear, if you're experiencing something other than that. So when you get triggered, have something, you throw it in the bucket. Or if you see somebody else triggered, you throw their stuff in the bucket. When it goes in the bucket, it's that person's shit. When it comes out, it's our shit. And then we heal together. We do the work. We find it inside of ourselves, which is different breakthrough processes, and own it, and then transcend it and let it go. And so we don't need to face it without. We don't need to face it by chance. We don't need to get from behind. I always say, I find the lie before the lie finds me. I find the fear before the fear finds me. I find the judgment before the judgment finds me. It's Judgment Day. When would now be a good time for Judgment Day? Today. Like, let's do it now. Let's get this done. And so I'm finding all my fears and my judgments and my lies, and so is our entire community. So it appears without those within. Law of attraction is our frequency. We tuning up, because we're literally not just talking about it, we're walking about it, actually doing the work, tuning up. Then, like, literally negative energies, negative frequencies can't get us. If you're listening to the radio and you hear country music song and then another one and then another one and another one, you're on a country music station. If you want to hear a new song, you just change the station. I noticed that John said this talk we're having right now is manifesting heaven on earth. Manifest doesn't mean to create. It means to make obvious what is already there. So when you change the station on your radio, all of a sudden you hear new songs. Did you create those new songs, or were they already there? They were already there. They were already playing. You were just on a different frequency. So it's about tuning up your frequency. And as John began this thing, that's like one of the greatest things. How you tune your frequency is there. Literally, this was what really brought the freedom to. So salvation is a point, freedom is a process. I got my salvation, and I'm like, all right, grace, take my place. I'm a piece of crap. Like, how I know I need Jesus and this world needs Jesus, because I'm a piece of shit and you're a piece of shit. We're all pieces of shit. But together, if we will submit to the one, then we become the shit. All these little pieces that come together, we're the shit. But we just got to, let go of our need for control. But how I did this, where the freedom came for me is in this process. Every time something came at me that I did not like, I'm like, no, this is bad. This is wrong. Well, how we got to hell in the first place, or, left the kingdom in the first place, is we bit into the knowledge of good and evil. Judgment. We started judging things. This is bad and this is good. Now, God already created everything, created creatures, creators, creation, all of it. And he said, it's good. And then we bite into a fruit, a lie, that there's something other than good. And then we've been living inside the lie, making it more real than real. So how I came back out, my freedom aspect, was every time something showed up that I did not like, I'd repeat these phrases in my mind. The first one was, everything happens for a reason. Let's all do that now. Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens.
And once I said that, it neutralized. It went from this negative to now it's neutral. Everything happens for a reason. And all things work for good. Okay. All things work for good. Now it went from negative to neutral to positive. It's actually work. It's not just neutral. It's actually good. Now there's a caveat to that verse. That's a Bible verse. All things work for good. It's all things work for good for those who believe and are called according to God's purpose. So as long as you believe in God, you're submitted to God, you're calling according to his purpose, God's on the throne, and everything that he's doing it for you because he loves you. Now, if you're not calling according to his purpose, it's not going to work good for you. It might look good for a moment, but it's going to be bad in the end. There's a price that you're going to be paying. You might pay it up front or you might pay it on the back end, but there's a cost to it to decide and go against God in your own mind. You can't actually do it, but you can create the illusion and just be at war with love. So, everything happens for a reason. All things work for good. So for those who believe and are called according to his purpose. So as long as I believe in God, God is on the throne. I'm called according to his purpose, not my will, but thine be done. Use me however you want. And everything's, because if God's for me, who can be against me? So everything's working for good. Okay, great. So it's snapping me out of my false perspective, taking me off the throne as judge. I'm no longer judge of this moment. I'm not going to make a meaning to this. I'm not assigning any meaning to this moment. The only meaning to this moment is God's on the throne and he's about to show me. And so everything happens for a reason. All things work for good. And then that quote that John was sharing from Napoleon Hill, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater opportunity. So the worse the problem was that when I judged it as really, really bad, the more bad I thought it was. Once I've done with this process, guess what I'm doing by the end of this process? The worse it looks, the more I'm doing what? Celebrating. I'm like, wow. And that was writing my mind freedom from the sin of, the illusions of separation from God. And that's really, and now I went on this crazy journey of cleansing my mind of all my thinking that I'm God, that I'm the one on the throne, that I'm here to fix the things. Prayer is not saying, God, change my circumstances. Prayer is saying, God, help me see this through your eyes. Because if I think I'm supposed to change it, that means I think you're not on the throne. And I don't want to think that, because that means I think I'm on the throne. And I don't want to do that anymore. I've tried that. I don't want to be on the throne. I know you're on the throne. So you just guide me, God. And, as the Tao Te Ching says, the master does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone. So you're not going to do anything anymore. You're going to be done. You're going to be done by God. And then the world around you just starts to return the awareness of the kingdom that was already here the whole time, but you had to manifest it by cleaning the lies out of your eyes and the fears out of your ears. And that's the process to do it. Salvation, receiving Jesus as the king in my heart, and let him make me the king of my thing. I don't know. None of my business what I'm doing. It's his business. He's going to tell me what to do. That's his role. And then the freedom is just taking yourself off the throne. Anytime you see a moment shows up that you try to assign a negative meaning to it, nope, God's on the throne. And you go through that process, and then you will see freedom. And all of a sudden, the restoration of the kingdom, you'll get to be sitting inside of it, realizing you've been here the whole time, just like Dorothy, who went to Oz and then kicked her heels and woke up and realized that she was home the whole time after that journey trying to get where she already was.
Let's go. Okay. I can vibe with it, and it seems like a solid process. All right, let me see. James here in the accelerator chat, just popped another question to another comment. He says, I have a question. Sometimes it seems that our journey with our relationship with God is very personal, and also many things that are in the path are us trying to get back to God. However, it sometimes looks like some areas of life, God is hands off, in quotes, hands off. One of those things is money. It seems like God doesn't intervene with money in my life. It's hard to write my question. Thank you for the talk. And then he just added as well, I really feel like what is being said, I really like what's being said, but I can feel a sort of resistance to it. What is that all about? So maybe you could riff on God intervening or helping us with money or some things and not some things. Money really is a struggle for a lot of people, and I completely understand why. There's a lot worked into that. And then why might resistance rise with some folks with this message that you're spitting here?
Yeah, so resistance breeds persistence. What you fight against, you create. You're fighting because all you're doing is fighting against illusions. If you're fighting, there's a war going on because you're fragmented. You're double-minded. But so God, he's always there in all the everything. But sometimes he'll, the teacher is not there when it's time to take the test. He's going to back off. He's not going to tell you what to do. So sometimes you've already gotten the lesson and then it's time to take the test. So he's not going to be present in that moment of you. But the whole thing is, the test is for you to know that he is present, even when it looks like he's not. And speaking of money, like, dude, God is all over the money. Like, so Jesus said, those who have will be given more. Those who have not, even what they have will be taken from them. It's an inside job. You're just manifesting without whatever's going on inside it. Willpower will never overpower your subconscious beliefs about yourself. I am is the name of God. So if you're like, I am poor, then you're taking the full power of God to make yourself poor. Versus, as the Bible says, let the weak say they are strong. Let the sick say they are healed. I am, right? So enacting that. And then trusting, and then having the faith. Walk by faith, not by sight. Don't dig up in fear what you planted in faith. Once you have faith, okay, I'm taking this step. Okay, I've heard God and I'm taking this step forward. And there's like so many times, because you can either serve God or you can serve money. You can't serve two masters. That's what God says. So serve God or money. You can't serve two masters. And when I was still an atheist, I became a very successful real estate investor, made millions of dollars. But there was all this weight on my shoulders. It was so heavy because I was the one doing it. When I became spiritual, pendulum swung, and I literally gave away all my houses, gave away millions of dollars worth of cash and assets, just gave it away and became homeless again and became spiritual. Now I'm like super happy. I've got everything. I realized everything I've been looking for, I've had inside me the whole time. But now at this point, I'm realizing, well, I had already made this decision that I'm going to be a positive impact for humanity. And at this point, I can't even take care of myself, let alone anyone else. And in that moment, it was that time where God had then introduced me to what would become my wife. And when I became homeless, from millions of dollars to homeless, again, and she had a little 1-bedroom apartment. She takes me into her little 1-bedroom apartment and is like, hey, you can stay here. And I'm, well, cool. And so I still don't have to worry about money. But it didn't matter. I'd have been living in the woods. I'd have been fine. But now all of a sudden, eviction notice hits the door. And then it goes 2 months of not being able to pay the rent. And I'm like, well, this isn't actually working. I can't even take care of myself, let alone this person I love. This isn't working. And one of the hardest things that God had to break my ass to get me to do this thing, to make an offer. When I finally knew who I was in this world and what I was meant to do, one of the things I always say, if you don't want your pain to be in vain, turn your mess into a message. And I've got a lot of messes and a lot of messages because I did the wrong thing so many times. And I actually got the correct recipe. One of them being around money. And so the first offer that I ever gave, it was called the Spiritual Capitalist Mastermind, Spiritual Capitalist, doing well while doing good. And I had not mastered spiritual capitalist yet. I'd mastered capitalist, I'd mastered spiritual, but I hadn't mastered spiritual capitalist. But me making the offer for that mastermind was it happening. And I resisted that for so long. The reason that I was not able to pay the rent was because God had been telling me over and over, you have to make an offer. And I'm like, that's not spiritual, God. I can't make an offer for money. He's like, who's spiritual? Me or you? And I'm like, okay. He says, make the offer. It's the most important thing that you can do for people because, as Jesus said, where men's treasure is, there his heart will be also. And the greatest gift that you can give to humanity is if you can get their treasure and get them to put their treasure in the kingdom, then their heart will follow, because people have been indoctrinated, domesticated their entire lives, our entire educational system. The whole purpose of it was to get us to worship money, to get us to be slaves that don't even know we're slaves for 40 hours a week, for 40 years of our life, giving up our life for the almighty dollar. We've been programmed to worship money, to make money our God. Money's going to provide for me. Money's going to protect me. Money's going to give me what I want. That was all part of the programming. So it's the hardest thing in the world to break that, because that's the world that we grew up in. We do the wrong thing so long, the right thing feels wrong. So God's like, the greatest gift that you can give to anybody is to share me with them and have them move their treasure. Say, here's a donation. And I learned it because I started tithing. And by doing that process of tithing, you're taking money off the throne. Like, no, like God is my source. And if you don't have enough to feed the need, then what you have is a seed. And so I started sowing these seeds. I'm tithing even when I don't have any money. I don't have enough money to pay my bills. So the last thing I should be doing is tithing. But no, that's exactly what I should be doing. Sowing my seed, taking the conditions off of it. Because before I was a whore. We were all whores, giving to get. If I do this, then I'll get paid. I had to take the conditions off, and the only way to do that is through tithing and donating. So I started doing that. And what was really wild, when I gave it all to God. See, you can't save someone from their sovereignty. God could, but he won't. People can't, but we try. God won't save us from our sovereignty. He's like, his gifts are without repentance. He gave us the gift of the ability to create whatever we want. If we want to create hell for ourselves, go right on ahead. If we want to create the experience of eternal separation, what hell is separation from God. If we want to create the experience of eternal separation from God for ourselves, that's fine. You can do that. I love you enough to let you go. If you love something, set it free. So we can create whatever we want. And so I put it all on the altar. So you got to put your money on the altar. And how you do it, tithes and donations, that's really a first step, but it's got to be all encompassing. And so what I did is I put it all on the altar, and I'm doing that. And the eviction notice is on the door, and I'm like, God, I really know how to make money. Because I know real estate. And I'm like, I can make money with real estate. I know what to do. I got the recipe, but I got to be completely dependent upon God. I will never do anything for money ever again, because you're my God, not money. And so I got completely dependent upon God, even if it cost me everything, which it did. And then God says, okay, now go. He says, I'm hearing myself come back for some reason. All right, that's cool.
Are you still hearing yourself?
Yeah, I started getting feedback, but it's gone now. But so he said, all right, now you're completely dependent upon, you've been tithing, you've been donating, you're completely dependent upon me. I got negative bank account, $34 in my pocket. And then he sends an email to me from one of my old private lenders. And I knew it was God. I'm like, and I'm like, look at that. God came through. And my old private lender, when I was doing real estate, he's like, hey, come over to my house. I want to talk to you about something. I'm like, look at that. God has come through. He's about to give me money. Look at that. I know this guy's got money. Look at that. And so I go to the guy's house, ready to receive. And then the guy says, John, I want to sell you a piece of property. I'm like, well, that's the opposite. I'm supposed to be coming to get money, not give money. But remember, those who have will be given more. Those who have not, even what they have will be taken from them. I was in the perception that I didn't have money. And so it's never a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. I'm the most resourceful person I could possibly be, because I'm tapped into the source of all of the resources, God. And so I know that. And I'm remembering that in this moment. So now it's time to take the test. The guy says, will you buy this piece of property from me? He said, I'm going to sell it to you for $1,000, but you got to give me $1,000 tomorrow. You got at noon tomorrow. I'm like, well, I got negative bank account, $24 in my pocket. So my bank says no, but God says go. He says, do it. Shake his hand. Now, this guy was a 94-year-old war veteran. He's like, shake my hand. I'm like, okay. I don't have the money, but I'm going to tell you, I promise you, I will have that money by tomorrow. And I shook his hand. Before I even left the guy's house, I'm like walking out of his house. I start thinking about, okay, where I can come up with this money. And I started thinking about my friend Todd. And literally before I even walk out the door, Todd calls me. I'm like, whoa, Todd, hey. And I answer the call. And I'm like, Todd, I was just thinking about you. And he's like, wow, what's going on? And I tell him about this property. And I was like, will you loan me $1,000? He's like, sure, man. Because he knows this is a valuable property. So I get he says yes. I'm like, look at that. Well, that was quick. That was easy. God came through. But why'd God come through? Because I've been tithing. I've been putting him first. And I release the conditions upon money. Now I'm unconditionally giving, so I can also unconditionally receive. So then the next morning I wake up and I got $34 in my pocket, but this guy's going to give me 1,000. And I'm in the shower getting ready, and God says, you're not going to buy that property for $1,000. I'm like, what do you mean? He says, you're going to buy it for $10. I'm like, well, I'm not getting a good enough deal already. He says, yes, you're getting a great deal, but if you buy it for $1,000, you're going to have to borrow money from someone. And you work for me now, so I need you to have this free and clear. I need all the money that's going to come to you is coming for a purpose that I've assigned for you. And so I need you to have it free and clear without borrowing from anybody. You can't split it with this guy. I'm like, well, how am I going to get it for $10? He says, ask and you shall receive. I'm like, okay. I walked out of the shower and I tell my wife, Mel, I said, hey, you know that property I'm about to buy for $1,000? She's like, yeah. I said, I'm not buying it for $1,000. I'm buying it for $10. She's like, you're not getting a good enough deal already? I'm like, that's exactly what I said, but God told me I'm getting it for 10. So I call the guy up. His son answers. I was like, hey, you think your dad would sell me that property for $10? And he's like, I don't know. Let me ask him. He goes and asks his dad, comes back, and he says, yeah, he said he'll sell it to you for $10. I show up to the title company. I pull out, got $34. I pull out two $5 bills, throw it down. It's like, don't spend that all in one place. This dude starts jumping up and down. This 94-year-old man is so happy. He's got his two $5 bills. He's so happy. And I'm like, I should be the one happy right now because I just got the deal of a century because I know what this thing is worth. He paid $175,000 for this property. He had to bring $50,000 to the table to even sell it to me for $5. Now, that doesn't make any sense, except for God's plans always never make sense. And so everybody say it's not about the money. It's about being the answer to someone's prayers. And so this is when it happens. When you realize, like, if you're making it about the money, it's always about the money. Somebody's going to lose. It's not about the money. It's about being the answer to someone's prayers. And so I'm like, okay, it's about being the answer to someone's prayers. It's not about the money. And I'm like, so somehow I'm answering this guy's prayer. I don't know how. It's just God. I'm just doing what God's telling me to do. Find out later what happened. That dude, the 94-year-old man, he was preparing to die, and he wanted to only leave cash flowing commercial real estate property to his children, because anything else, he's like, they'll screw it up. And he went to his attorney, says, I want to fire sell this for $100,000 so if I die tomorrow, I can rest in peace because I've left them with, they're going to be good. But this is not a cash flowing commercial real estate property. I want to fire sell it for $100,000. His attorney says, no, you can't do that. You paid $175,000 for it. If you just put $1 million into it, you can make $2 million profit off of it. And so when I paid him $10, the reason he was so happy, because he just could not wait. He says, John, I don't think my attorney knows that he works for me. I think he thinks I work for him. And he was happier to buy that property or sell that property to me for $10 than he was $1,000. Because he just could not wait to go back to his attorney and say, that property you wouldn't let me sell for $100,000? Yeah, well, I was thinking about selling it for $1,000 just to rub it in your face. But instead, I didn't want to do that. Instead, I sold it for $10. That's what he wanted to do. I was the answer to his prayers. But it doesn't end right there. So then a week later, at midnight, I get a phone call. I didn't hear my phone. I didn't have my phone. I didn't hear it. But at 3 a.m., I saw that I had a missed call and I had a message. I'm like, 3 a.m. And remember, and this is the time where we got an eviction notice on the door. And I'm like, I listened to the message, and there's this guy. He says, God woke me up at midnight. He shook me. He literally, like, I felt the hands of God shake me, waking me up, and says, you need to call John and tell him right now that you got $100,000 cash that you're going to give him tomorrow for a piece of property he's got. I'm like, what? And I listened to it. I'm like, it's 3 a.m. And I hand over Mel. I'm like, Mel, listen to this. And she's like, what? I was like, call him back. So Mel calls him back, says, what is this? And he's like, God told me loud and clear, shook me, says, I have to give John $100,000 cash tomorrow for a piece of property. It was the property I bought for $10. 1 week later, I didn't do anything to it. I bought it for $10. 1 week later, I had $100,000 cash in my account.
Wow.
So God is definitely in your money, but you got to get out. You got to get your hands off of it and let Him handle it.
Come on. Okay, man. All right. Well, yeah, this is good. Good stuff. We could talk for hours and hours.
I know.
But we've been going for like an
hour. Get me all inspired, man. I know that I went long on that, but I couldn't help it.
No, you're good.
It's asking.
It's wild how it all comes together when you just let go. Okay, good stuff. Before we go, just real quick, do you have your Off-Grid Dream Life thing coming up this weekend, or is that about to happen again?
Yeah, got one coming up on Saturday.
Folks want to dive deeper and learn more, not only about Jonathan, the work he's doing. If this has resonated with you, he'll share more about Earthwaking Village, also an opportunity to go check them out. Do you want to promote that and let folks know how they could sign up for this free webinar?
Yeah, just go to offgriddreamlife.com. Offgriddreamlife.com. Sign up for free. We're going to be, it's a 2-hour event, but you can already kind of guess it's probably not going to be 2 hours. Most people we actually literally we'll be there for 4. You're like, there's no way I'm going to be sitting here for more than 2 hours, but most of the people are going to be there like 4 hours in, still like, wow, this is really great. So offgriddreamlife.com, and we'll see you on Saturday at noon Central.
Let's go. All right. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure hanging out. I'm going to come down and visit you sooner than later, and we'll do some cool stuff together.
We're doing a mastermind down here, aren't we, really soon?
We're doing it. Yep. I don't know if it's really soon, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen sooner than later, that's for sure. Let's put it on the calendar and make it happen. Hopefully folks could join us as well. Okay, thanks so much, Jonathan. Appreciate you, brother. All right.
Thank you.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You've been tuned in to the Live Free Now show, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live a free, prosperous, and healthy life. I do want to encourage you guys to join me tomorrow. I'm doing a free webinar. It's going to be all about money. There'll be a huge emphasis on money mindset. So for those of you that may be struggling, or this may be one of your pain points, come on and check us out. We'll be talking about the spiritual side a bit as well, and just diving deep into how we can overcome those limiting beliefs, how we can become the best versions of ourselves. And we'll definitely spend some time figuring out some strategies and some tactics and how we can help other people to solve their problems and be rewarded as a result for it. Go to livefree.academy/money. That's livefree.academy/money. It's going down tomorrow, September 5th at 12 p.m. And then we'll be doing it again September 10th at 6 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us again, folks. If you want to subscribe, I encourage you to do that. Hit the subscription button down there to follow our YouTube channel. And you can also hit that bell notification to get alerted when we go live. We're going live every single Wednesday. Also, I'm very active on Twitter. Check me out at John B. Live Free, at John B. Live Free. And if you want to follow our daily email newsletter, we send out an email every single day. You can sign up for free at livefree.academy/email. That's livefree.academy/email.